So, I don't have the balance notes in front of me. So, the first thing that we want to mention is there was a balance update that came out today. And this balance update was a backend. There was no patch that was required. The developer was able to go in without updating the game and balance it. And most of the community's in an uproar because the survivor side got mostly nerfs. Very few buffs. There was a handful of buffs. And the killer side got one nerf and everything else was buffs. Like, literally the only nerf. So, explaining it a little bit is important. There's two main reasons that this balance patch came out. And I want to address something. The majority of the changes that were done in this balance patch are not going to stay. They are not permanent fixes. But, let's discuss the things that we need to get out of the way early on. So the first thing I want to mention, the only nerf that the demon players received was to possessing a survivor. When you possess a survivor, and you use that survivor's gun, you deal less headshot damage now. So it goes from 1.7 to 1.2 headshot multiplier. Now, on the demon side of things, let's talk about what got buffed. Cars got buffed, which is one of the legitimate changes. The Necronomicon stage got buffed. You get more infernal energy per second now. This is a quality of life change. This might actually stay. This is not a band-aid fix because most demon players lose during the Necronomicon book stage. So then what got buffed? Well, first off, every single boss unit in the game got their headshot damage buffed. So now, instead of 1.5 times headshot bonus, it's now 1.25. This is for all three of the bosses. Now, for some this affects some bosses more than others, in my opinion. This, to me, affects the Necromancer more because his headshot hitbox is very vulnerable when he's doing Force Choke. For the Puppeteer, it's not that bad. The only time you're really going to get hit by a headshot is if you're locked in an animation. When you're moving, you're invisible, you're kind of hard to hit. For the Warlord, when she goes for her titty grab, her head hitbox is kind of hard to hit. It's not obviously difficult, but it's more difficult than it might need to be. So, those changes are nice. This is to prevent the bosses from getting one-shot. This is an important theme that we're going to be circling back to in a minute. All of the possessed unit variations, all three of them, got an increase buff to their balance bar, and the basic units got a buff to their health bars when they get possessed. They also retweaked the pink F upgrade for the killer side for level 5 possession. And for the Necromancer specifically, his elite units had their individual arm health values doubled. All elites got a health bonus. Let's start with that. All the elites got a health bonus. And all of the skeletons got damage resistance to the arms. I will say that the elite skeleton got his doubled. It doesn't list the actual value for the basic skeletons, but it's a 25% on them. So he's up to 200, and they're up to about 125. Now, the number one complaint that the survivor side of the game is having is that basic unit possession is overpowered. Every single basic unit in the game is kind of bullshit and broken. Henrietta is kind of bullshit because her basic units she can just possess a basic unit, puke, so then the survivors are unable to sprint, heal, dodge, attack, and then she can just start swinging away because they don't have a cooldown on their basic attacks. If you look at the Puppeteer basic unit has the fastest attack speed in the game. So if you use Puppet Power, you can just possess a basic unit, rush up, swing, and you're pretty much dead. There is that little roar animation that a lot of Puppeteer players are like, well, why did they have that roar? Basic units are weak because they have that roar. That's literally a cooldown that's built into your character to keep your character, with its high attack speed, from just swing away. And obviously, we know about the Necromancer, sorry, about to call him the Necronomicon. because he gets even more bonuses with the Flutist. Why would they buff the single most annoying, the single most complained about part of the game? And the answer is very simple. Demon player Qs are too quick. Demon players right now, their Q times are insane. I could literally go Q as a Necromancer. I might actually do that. Let's just go Q, right? Let's see how long our Q time is. I'm on stream. I have a timer. There are not enough demon players out there, right? I Q. I should have a game before 6:30. My timer right now is at 5:30 at the start. 1 minute Q time. I'm gonna pull out. I'm not actually gonna play the game. But the demon Q times have been way too quick. And if you look online, I got a game. 30 seconds, I got a game. If you look at the Q times for the demon player are insanely high. If you look at, or insanely low, I should say, which means there's not enough players. There's not enough demon players out there. And if you look at the demon player and say, well, why is that? The developers have said that there's an even 50-50 balance, but win-loss between killer and survivor. So why are the demon players getting all these buffs? The main reason is because there are less demon players. I don't mean that there's 3 demons and there's 13 survivors. I mean that as in demon players are leaving. Because you have your YouTubers who are professional players. They play the game. Your streamers who play the game non-stop. Dead by Daylight killer mains who come over and play. Guys like True Talent and that. When they come over and they play the killer side and they know what they're doing, they are getting these massive win streaks. And you're seeing these things about how many demon player games that they're winning, right? And how they win almost every single game. The numbers are 50-50. What does that mean? Does that mean that survivors are having the same thing, where a coordinated group of survivors is just going in and winning every single game? Yes, probably. But the bigger issue is that there are more survivor players out there than there are killer players. There are a lot more survivors. Survivor in this game is a lot more fun to play than in games like Dead by Daylight or VHS. Whereas the demon is actually a bit more powerful in this game than the other. Playing demon player is an exercise in getting bullied. You're either using a cheap tactic to win, you're either really good at the game so it doesn't matter what the survivor throws at you, or you don't give a shit. But it's not balanced. This game's a bit more balanced. So why are they unbalancing the game? Well, the simple reason is that they need to have a meta right now. They need to have a meta, and that meta has to be, for right now at least, basic unit possession. As uncomfortable as that is to say, basic unit possession is necessary in order for the demon side to live longer. And you might say, well, then that's just going to piss off the survivors and the survivors are going to leave. Well, the answer to that is no. The survivors aren't going to leave. There's more survivors. There's almost twice as many survivor players out there, by the way, than there are demon players. If you go off the numbers, survivors that have more play time than they do on killer is almost 2 to 1. So because of that fact, they have to buff the demon. And if you notice, none of the demon values changed. They did not go in and change any parts of the demon's kit. They didn't buff individual demons. The only thing that they buffed about specific demons, as opposed to an overall thing, is they adjusted all of their values pretty much the same. They didn't go out and say, hey, Necromancer's Flutist is overpowered. Hey, Puppeteer's Shock is overpowered. Hey, Warlord's Puke is overpowered. They left all of those values alone. And the reason, I think, is it's a band-aid fix. They're trying to cover up that they need a little bit more content. I think they're waiting for Castle Kandar to come out with some more content. Maybe we get a DLC Survivor. Maybe we get a bigger balance change around that. But for right now, they're trying to keep the basic unit possession in the game because the Survivor players are talking non-stop about basic units are overpowered. I think that part of the reason is that they want to actually get some numbers to see if it is overpowered. And if it is overpowered, basic unit possession is broken, they may go in and just nerf all the basic unit possession and make it more variable. Or they might be trying to see if it's like, okay, so for example, the Puppeteer might be broken on basic unit possession, but the Necromancer was balanced. or the Warlord is balanced. So there's no need to tweak all basic unit possession, just some. It might be an experiment more than anything. So now we move to the Survivor side. Now this is where I want to talk about, people say there was a lot of nerfs here. Let's talk about the nerfs. This is the second issue. This balance patch is a band-aid because there's no bugs that got fixed. Which I did not find out at the time because, see, I'm still running Industrial Strength 3 on all my characters. I'm not going to bother going back and changing. I'm still running Industrial Strength 3. I don't care. I don't care if it's still bugged. Why am I mentioning this? Because of this fact, outside of a couple of actual balance changes to the game, like, we'll get to the Warrior balance change, we'll get to the Leader Ash balance change, and we'll get to the Hunter balance change. Some of these are bug fixes, and I want to cover that. So, for example, Cheryl got her healing range nerfed from 6 meters to 5 meters on her Shems. And she gets a bonus carrying range, or a bonus activation range to her Shems. That's supposed to go up. That's a bug. That's not intended. Why they nerfed her default range is they haven't fixed the bug. Nerfing her default healing range brings her in line with both Pablo and Support Ash. Kelly got a nerf to her level 25 ability of Battle Frenzy. So Battle Frenzy's been glitched where it's supposed to be that your melee damage would increase by 2% per second in sustained combat, up to 30 stacks. Problem. A, being in the game counted as sustained combat. So you basically got your 30 stacks 30 seconds into the game. And B, it applied to your range damage. So this meant that you had 60% bonus damage to melee and gunplay. They can't fix that right now. So how did they adjust it? Nerf it. Make it 1%. Now, at 30 stacks, that's a 30% bonus. It's not too broken, but it's not too bad. Although, I mean, if that 30% melee damage basically just offsets her penalty with melee weapons. So it basically turns her into a leader with melee weapons, and her buff to the ranged weapon support is kind of bullshit, but that's hunters for you. Another character. Both of the leaders that got changes are because of bugs. So, for example, Arthur right now is bugged. Both of his auras, his Weapon Master auras, are actually dealing ranged weapon, not melee weapon. The Lord's Wrath is bugged. It's not working properly as well. It's not reducing fear. It's not preventing fear from going up. And you're not benefiting from the melee damage. Only your teammates are. So, what did they do? They nerfed the Lord's Wrath. Now that doesn't make sense. Why would you nerf that ability? They're trying to get players to use it a little bit less than normal because the bug is also leading to crashes. If you've ever wondered why certain players are DCing, Lord's Wrath is part of the reason. I'm not going to stop using it. I'm a dick like that. But, end of the day, I felt the need to mention it. Because of that reasoning. Now, Annie's another one. Her active ability is bugged. It's supposed to be 100% bonus damage. It's only granting 30%. So what did they do? They took her passive buff and made it from 10% to 25%. Now, you might be thinking, well, why would you give her a buff like that? Because it's not anywhere near the range that the other one was. Because they're trying to tell you, hey, don't stop playing this character. We're going to fix it. Here's something to keep you going. Another issue is Leader Ash. Leader Ash is often called the worst character of the game, or the second worst character in the game. Him and Scotty are kind of going 1-2. How did they fix that? They buffed his damage aura. It's now 15%, and if you have the level 25, where it doubles when you get a finisher or a dismemberment, even though that's a little bit harder to do now, which is, I think, part of the reason as well, they made dismembering and they made balance bar damage a bit higher. That way there, it's harder to get your finishers, it's harder to dismember enemies. So they're fine with the damage buff going up, because it doubles, so now you go up to 30%, which is a substantial amount. That's a decent buff to him. I don't think it's the right buff. I still think that they should have done some reworking. So, some of this is band-aid fixing to cover things. If you notice, the first balance update that they did, where they literally just touched, like, the two support characters. They nerfed Cheryl's cooldown into the ground, and the healing, and they nerfed support Ashe's healing. They didn't retouch them. I think part of the reason behind that is because they think they're fine. I also think they want to extend the cooldowns a little bit more on the survivor side. The more impactful abilities that are being spammed the most, you're seeing go up. Because if you look, all these two cooldowns right here are both at 2 minutes. She's at 1.5 minutes. Both of these two got changed to 1.5 minutes. Army of Darkness Ashe is almost at 1.5 minutes. And they're the most impactful, the most commonly used abilities in the game are all 90 seconds or higher. To try and even them out with the demon side, where like the flutist is a massive cooldown. I think what's the flutist on it? It's like 90 seconds, I think. 75 seconds. Okay. Puppeteer should be 90. Right? Yeah, 90. And I think Henrietta's is 90. Might be 75 though. It doesn't list it here, but I think it's 90. It's either 90 or 75. I think the reason why they did that is they wanted to make it so that you couldn't just keep spamming your ability as a survivor to specifically counter other abilities. So now we can talk about the two big things. One is the warrior change that people are talking about with Army of Darkness Ashe, and the other one are the hunters. As hunters got the nerfs. There's a general nerf to the survivor side where it takes a second longer to revive. That's something demon players were complaining about. I think it's going to be something they're experimenting with as well. So Army of Darkness Ashe got a nerf, and Skadi did not get a buff. And people are talking about why that is. Well, here's why. The developers I already know that the developers think that Skadi is a balanced character. It is not that he is overpowered. People keep saying he's underpowered. Thunder Thrust doesn't do enough damage. It has a 30-second cooldown. It's not designed to do a lot of damage because it has a short cooldown. Yes, it can get interrupted and it can get canceled, but that's the same for a few other abilities in the game. The reason why they left that the way they did is because it has such a short cooldown. And you might say, well, Army of Darkness Ashe does more damage. We'll get to that in a minute. You know, his abilities aren't that great. But when you get to level 25, you get Lumberjack Axe Mastery, which is one of the better weapons in the game. And him getting a weapon mastery with that really does make up for some of the damage problems. People really don't want to acknowledge that and talk about that. Henry as well hasn't received any changes. And if you look at Henry's a very good defensive tank, but he has next to no offense. The only offense outside of his skill tree is just rebound, which is damage he receives gets inflicted back. Army of Darkness Ashe was overpowered. Everybody agreed on this. Even Survivor Main said this was overpowered. And he got sweeping nerfs. But I think the big thing that you want to talk about is this. So Shield Blast got nerfed from 200 to 125 a bar. This brings him in line closer to Skadi. But the difference is, with Army of Darkness Ashe, this is to kind of tone down the free damage he can get. Remember that hits in an area, hits around the same area that Skadi does. And yes, he can regenerate his ability faster. His shield blast can go off more often than Skadi can, because Skadi's tied to a cooldown. That's not the point. Another thing to mention is Wise Man's Potion kind of got nerfed across the board. They nerfed the duration by 5 seconds, they nerfed the cooldown by 20 seconds, and they nerfed the damage reduction by 20%. So it's now a flat 30% damage increase, 30% damage reduction, which is nice, although it does kill the damage reduction a bit. The thing is, it's possible to create an insane amount of damage reduction. If you were to build Tougher Than Hell, if you were to build Seasoned Survivor Basic, if you were to build around Reduced Amulets, you could just stack incredible amounts of damage reduction on him to the point where he becomes unkillable. Another issue as well is that a lot of players were not picking up quicker cooldown other than a cursory 1 point here to get access to Seasoned Survivor tree here. So there's more of an incentive now to go into that. They nerfed the duration, which I'm fine with, because the duration was kind of wacky. They nerfed the cooldown, which I'm fine with, because it was a relatively short cooldown for what it gave you. So these Army of Darkness Ashe changes are fine. I still think that either Finish Strong should have maybe been given to Ashe, to Leader Ashe, and you swap Leader Ashe's spawning with the chainsaw into Army of Darkness Ashe to make him play more around his chainsaw. But it doesn't, there's not really great synergy as to why he has access to a chainsaw. But they don't want to buff either of these two warriors, because these two warriors are actually well-balanced characters. Playing them properly. If you're playing them in a group as the tank, you're the one who should be going out and brawling the biggest target possible. As a warrior. An Army of Darkness Ash, his problem is that he can 1v1 bosses. He just pops his power and I can go 1v1 a boss. Well, they're trying to fix that a little bit. He's overwhelming against smaller units, against AI units. And against a boss, he's too strong. So I think a lot of these changes are to kind of reel him in so he's not as 1v1 capable against the boss. So he's not as overwhelming against AI units. Hunters are the big one. So Amanda and Kelly, we don't really need to talk about them. Kelly, like I explained, her Battle Frenzy is literally due to a bug. And Amanda, she didn't really get any tweaks that are worth mentioning outside the builds. These two characters both got changes to their things, and all Hunters got changes. So one thing is that they made they changed the Pink F tier 4 upgrade. That's not a big change. That's perfectly fine. They made it so that stamina recovery for Hunters is now a little bit slower. That's not really an issue. You just have to change your timing. So you can't like dodge, 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 and then wait like 1 or 2 seconds, and then dodge, 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 and then wait 1 or 2 seconds, and then dodge, dodge, dodge. You're not regenning your stamina so fast that the demon player can't catch you. This is a fair, balanced trade-off because Hunters are a bit of a glass cannon. Now I'm going to use, I'm going to talk about the changes to the loadouts first. I already covered this when I did the 5 builds video for Hunter Ash here. The most common thing that everybody says is you always wanted to build this tree. You always wanted to build Deadly Up Close and Last Chance. Deadly Up Close was a larger damage bonus than Deadly from a Distance. They nerfed Deadly Up Close's damage to put it closer, more on par with Deadly from a Distance, which I personally like that. It makes it so that the damage is now caps at 20% instead of 25%, and Deadly from a Distance is still the same, which shows they want you to play more around Deadly from a Distance. And this is also a little inadvertent nerf to shotguns and blunderbusses kind of being overpowered. And then they nerfed maxed out. 20% bonus damage in the last bullet of a gun is still really good. And it's still a permanent buff to things like the blunderbuss and the crossbow, which are one shot, and almost perma buffs to your double barrel, your boomstick, your hunting rifle, which are 2 shots. It's not anywhere near the range where you should consider like de-equipping. You still want to build towards it. The thing, in my opinion, is you might want to rework the build a little bit more. Like, one thing you'll notice here, I took my 2 points out of staying power and I put them into quicker cooldown. Now, the reason for that is this. So staying power got nerfed. Staying power went from capping at 25% to capping at 15%. It went from 15, 20, 25 down to 5, 10, 15. Here's why I'm not running this anymore on any of my builds at the 2 points. I'm now just using this as a filler point. Because running this no longer gives you an extra dodge. See, with 25% increased maximum stamina, with comboed with the 35% reduced cost of dodging, you could get an extra dodge or 2. 2 if you put a couple of pink F points in. You only need 2 pink F points. You got an extra dodge on top of that, so you would get 2 dodges. Now, with the Artful Dodger reduction, you only get 1 extra dodge. At staying power at 15 doesn't give you that bonus. You need to hit 20% maximum stamina for the extra dodge. 15% is nothing. You needed to be at 20%, and because of that, there's no point to me in putting my points into staying power. So I moved those 2 points out. That's the only thing I would do, which, to be fair, I actually do need to check my builds, because I don't know if... Yeah, so I don't have just 2 points there in him. Kelly, I think I moved hers. Yeah, she's good, because I took her 2 points out of that. And where did I have Amanda at? Yeah, her 2. Okay, so her points have already been moved. So, just some general balancing on the Hunters, which are fine. I still say the guns are what need to get nerfed more than the Hunters, but I digress. So, both of the Hunters that were being played the most got buffed. Now, everybody said that Ed was shit. Then people figured out how his power worked, and oh my god, Ed is great. He got way too much value out of his flashlight. Because if you think about it, so you have the flashlight up for 40 seconds, and then it goes down for 60 seconds. but realistically, you could time it to where I'm about to loot a house. Let me turn my flashlight on. One thing I did notice when I played Ed today is he is bugged right now, where his flashlight will no longer disable traps on crates. I played against a demon player that had trapped every single crate in front of me because he was in spirit form following me. I had my flashlight on, and I was not able to disarm the traps on any of those crates. I was not able. The only thing I could disarm were the traps in the environment, and only if they were not set by the demon. So I was still getting hit by scare traps, but I wasn't disabled. But I was still able to disable the ones that he hadn't set. So it is kind of bugged right now. This is a fair thing. Now they offset this by they buffed the collector. It's not listed here. It's kind of in the back end again. So the items now have a higher rarity drop. Like there is now better loot boxes, better crates, and in addition to that, there's a guaranteed legendary crate now, extra, by having a level 25 Ed on your team. Now I don't know if they fixed the bug or not, where having an Ed or a Hunter Ash automatically gave you better crates, but in my opinion, that's fine. The one that a lot of people are complaining about that goes hand in hand with them buffing, because they buffed the demon basic unit build, is they nerfed Exorcist to a degree. The reason for this is they increased the cooldown from 60 seconds to 90 seconds. The reason for this is that most players would sit on Exorcist, and anytime the demon possessed a basic unit or another player, they would pop the power. Now, the first thing I want to mention is if it possesses a player, that's fine, that's the intent of it. But if they possessed a basic unit, unless that basic unit was the only basic unit there, it did nothing. Because a smart demon player would just possess the next basic unit. So all they essentially did was they lost some infernal energy, and they lost a unit. Or you could just spawn a portal for some basic units, or a fear trap for some basic units, and then immediately just possess that unit. And the main thing is that newer players would do is they would use the power on elites or bosses, and it has no effect at possessing that survivor. But what it does do is it reduces the infernal energy by 20% now. It was 15, now it's 20%. I personally want it at 25%. I think 25% is a fair trade-off, because we're losing 30 seconds of cooldown. I would at least like to get 10% more infernal energy reduction. So, go from 15 to 25. That's a quarter of that bar. Make it a bit more impactful to use it that way. They want you to play around that a bit more. So, to sum all this up, where people are complaining about, oh my god, the survivors are getting nerfed. The survivors are getting nerfed because the demons are leaving. And they need to keep the demons, otherwise there's nobody for the survivors to fight. In addition to that, I think a lot of this, because this is, like I said, this is a back-end update, I think a lot of this is actually going to get changed once they can figure out a way to fix some of these bugs.